Jaykumar has flown across the world to be here, which we really are grateful for, because I think you'll hear what he's doing is quite noteworthy and not something you probably have heard about, although there was an article in the New Yorker that talked about it. He's been getting to get a little press because what he's doing is so innovative. He's the co-founder of something called the Open Source Pharma Foundation. So what is it and what are you trying to do, Jaykumar?
Well, first of all, hello, Sonoma, and hello to Wine Country. Thank you for bringing me out. Thank you to our mutual friend at The Economist who introduced us. And what we're trying to do, David, is very simple. We're trying to create medicine for all. And to dial it back even further, David, what we're all about is love. So
that sounds good to me.
Yeah, love for the 2 billion people who are malnourished. That's one of our projects. And love for the 8 billion people, including all of us, whose lives have been disrupted by the pandemic and other diseases, and all of us remain vulnerable to these things. And so we're offering a sort of new paradigm and an abundance of hope.
Okay, how are you doing that?
Very simple. So David, right now to make, and again, we have two different projects here, right? So I'll start with the pharma project, and then we'll come to the malnutrition project. For pharma, it costs $2 to $3 billion and 15 to 20 years typically to make a new drug or a new vaccine. Even in when the world was focused on it in COVID, it took us a year plus to develop vaccines. And these vaccines are wonderful, but they leave us vulnerable to variants. When the next pandemic hits, it's going to take another year of economic disruption and personal disruption. And we want to do something that's far better and also far more accepted. So we're working basically in a new scientific paradigm. The technical word is trained innate immunity.
Trained innate immunity.
That's right. So basically, can I give an 8th grade science lesson for a minute?
Please.
So all the vaccines that we have today work on what's called the adaptive immune system. But there's another immune system that we have called the innate immune system, which acts within seconds and which is what they call pathogen agnostic. It can take care of any variant or any bug that hits us. And it's an underexploited area of science. And I'm happy to say this is not just me saying this, but the sort of scientific elite is now behind this. I just came from a conference in Copenhagen, which was on this subject of universal vaccines or broadly protective vaccines. It was addressed by the WHO chief scientist. We have the WHO Strategic Advisory Group on Vaccines is saying this is an area of further exploration that's needed. We have Dr. Robert Gallo, the #1 most referenced scientist in the world, the co-discoverer of HIV, who's collaborating closely with us on this. So this is the new wave. mRNA, wonderful but old. This is paradigm shaking. And so we're taking this new scientific paradigm, and we're also coupling it with a new legal and economic paradigm, which means that vaccines are publicly funded. They're funded by you, David, they're funded by me. The IP should belong to us all. And if we don't do that, then we see what happened with COVID, which is only a few people get the vaccines, and the pandemic continues for longer for all of us than it should have. So the word pandemic means Greek for all people, and so we say the solution has got to be open source.
But what does that mean?
So that means we are developing new vaccines that have this innate immune quality that will protect against all variants and all vaccines, and the IP will be available around the world, meaning people in poor countries and people in rich countries will have equal access. And as an interim step, fortuitously, some of the existing vaccines that are out there in the world that have been used for decades, for tuberculosis, for measles, for polio, they're called live attenuated vaccines. And they have this quality of broad spectrum protection. And they're sorely underinvested. And so that's our interim step, is to work on some of these. And we are very far along. We're in phase 3 trials, which is almost at the end, and the manufacturing is in place. And these will cost 15 cents a dose.
Trials for what exactly?
So for BCG against COVID, And so there was a huge article in the New York Times on
BCG is what?
Oh, I'm sorry, the tuberculosis vaccine.
Right, okay, go on.
As well as the measles vaccine against COVID and the polio vaccine against COVID.
So existing vaccines that were developed for other diseases turn out to help with COVID.
That's right.
But nobody bothered developing them because nobody can make a huge amount of money doing that. Is that what it basically comes down to?
Essentially, yes.
Right.
Yeah. So, but we bothered, and we're here trying to protect you and me. And these vaccines can be used earlier. They can be used in conjunction with the existing COVID vaccines. And so it's a different paradigm for drug development. It's one that works to serve all of us. And so we're one of the few humanitarian pharmas out there, David.
So you call yourselves open source.
Yeah.
In a sense, it's because it's pre-existing technology. I mean, I don't quite get the open source terminology here. Could you
Sure.
explain it a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, the pharma industry, we're in Silicon Valley. People here understand software and open source. What if medicines were like open source software, which means that rather than scientists working in the proprietary model is scientists working in a few large companies and developing things amongst themselves, an open source method in pharma would mean crowdsourced science, open IP, heavy use of computation, products available to all people. And so in this context, what we're saying is a generic drug is it's like open source in that nobody owns the IP, and it belongs to us all and anybody can produce it.
So what is holding this back from having already made a difference? I mean,
Yeah.
you are a visionary. You've got something in phase 3 trials. It took a long time to get there. What's the holdup? Is it money? Is it money because there's nobody making huge profits here?
That, I'd say it's a failure of finance. It's also a failure of imagination. And it's also a political failure. So the science is clear. This is worthy of exploration. There's no doubt about it. It's right as rain, as sure as I'm sitting here and you're sitting here. The evidence is there for this to be pursued. But I can understand those who are slow. We're talking about government systems, which are slow to react. And we're talking about a new scientific paradigm and also a different legal and economic paradigm that doesn't involve big pharma. And so all of this is a lot to digest for people. But ultimately will be proven right.
Do you think big pharma is going to fight against it, and how effective could they be in doing that?
It won't be so crude as that, but it's actually it's almost more disappointing. It's that the entire public systems that we have are oriented towards proprietary products made by large industry. And so even the government systems and the philanthropic systems have been oriented towards the traditional model.
Okay, now let's go to your other product area,
Yeah.
because you actually are further along in the deployment of that. Tell us what that is.
That's right. So there was a question posed. If you had $75 billion and you wanted to help the world, what would you do? What's the most cost-effective thing that you could do? And this was posed to an elite group of economists called the Copenhagen Consensus. 5 of them were Nobel laureates. And their answer for the number one most cost-effective thing that you could do was something called micronutrients. Now, micronutrients are vitamin A, vitamin D, iron, iodine. It's the small, little, tiny things that nourish our bodies. And the most common form of malnutrition in the world is iron deficiency. So it affects 2 billion people, David, and it causes increased maternal mortality, it causes anemia, decreased mental capacity. It's not a good thing. And so our solution is so simple, so elegant. We've taken a smidgen of iron and added it to iodized salt. Now, iodized salt already reaches 5 billion people a day. It's one of the most widely used fruits of human creation, up there with sort of roads and mobile phones. And so to add this iron to the iodized salt costs 25 cents a person a year.
A year.
A year. And so this has gone to massive scale. You always hear about social innovation. It's usually about a cool idea. This is something that's gone to scale. It's helping people at scale. So it's reached over 20 million people. It's been included in billions of meals. And there have been large-scale studies showing reduction in iron deficiency at scale. And these are published studies. So that's a victory that we're hoping to expand upon. And yes, for both of these, I think we are not making a cent off of this. We've assembled the world's greatest scientists, and we're doing this out of the goodness of our hearts. So the finance is always a question. We've come far. We've raised millions of dollars from blue chip funders, but we need a lot more to reach the billion-plus people that we need to.
Yeah, because you've just told us basically you've addressed 1% of the problem.
That's right.
There's 2 billion people and you got 20 million that are getting it. You know, kudos to you.
Yeah.
But you got to scale that thing, right?
I thought you were a journalist, David. You're really good at math. Yes,
Oh,
yeah.
That's a pretty easy one.
Yeah.
But so what you need for that is money.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And you didn't get that 75 billion.
That's right. So we've gotten money from some governments, but we need a lot more, not much more actually, because it's very catalytic, but we could use more. Sure.
What governments have been supporting this?
So the SALT project has been funded by the Government of Canada and 3 state governments in India, as well as the Gates Foundation and the Tata Trusts. And the Pharma project has been funded by 4 philanthropies and 1 government. The philanthropies being Wellcome, Soros, Rockefeller, and Tata, the government being Government of India. We're doing this all, for 1% or less of the development cost of the private sector, because we have a secret weapon. We can use what's already created. So
it's a real visionary approach, and this is why you are starting to get articles in the New Yorker and elsewhere. But we wanted to help you further by giving you a little more platform here. But so you're a human rights lawyer, right?
That's right.
How did you get into this?
So, yeah, it's a great question. I'm used to uphill battles, and everybody, we're used to winning, so join, right? If you can see the bandwagon, somebody told me, it's already too late, so get on while you can. In my first death penalty case, I won, and we freed a man from death row. In my first wrongful conviction case, we won. And I was the 15th lawyer on the case, and we freed a man named David Wong who was innocent, and he's now walking free today. And after the second of these victories, we were sitting around in the law office, and they said, well, this was great, but it took 15 years and 15 people to free this one person. It's not great ROI. And I said, this is the most boorish thing I've ever heard. But then I took it to heart, and I thought, well, what if our clients could be the world's people? And for a similar amount of effort, we could help billions of people. And I started to switch at that point from negative human rights, don't torture me, don't imprison me, to something I'd always been interested in, positive human rights. I have a year of med school under my belt as well, and I'd been always interested in this, and I started to get the opportunity to it. And I'll say for all of us, we're not here on this planet for very long. And there's what Obama talked about, the poverty of dreams. I mean, we can go for a nice house, but what if we could really make an impact on some of these age-old problems? This is real stuff. It's not commerce solutions, et cetera, et cetera. This is ending hunger, ending disease. These are sort of biblical questions, and we have the ability to do something about it.
Really impressive. Okay, somebody must have a question or just to say kudos to this guy. Ken.
Well,
I hope, first say kudos, will you?
yeah, totally. Ken Washington at Amazon. Kudos, man. Awesome. So my question is, if I were a biopharma executive listening to you speak,
Yeah.
I would be like, well, dude, like come work for us and we'll like make it happen. Like, why hasn't that happened? What am I missing?
Well, in some sense, it can't happen inside of pharma. I mean, we're talking about charging 10 cents a pill. And for a large pharmaceutical company to be interested in something, it has to make several billion in revenue. I think we could make a few $100 million in what we're doing. And actually, that's something we're trying to explore now with, and if anybody knows of impact investors who work in pharma, in addition to foundations, let us know. But it's a little antithetical to the model. It goes back to Microsoft versus Linux, open sources versus proprietary. The counter to that is, in software, we've seen those two now have coexist, and there's détente.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to say because, I used to cover Microsoft, and they used to say, open source is socialism.
Yeah.
And then they bought GitHub, right? So they figured out how to profit from it, even though it is socialism or whatever. Who cares? So there's a way for big companies to get behind these things.
They do want to learn open ways of doing things. They come to our conferences. Our scientists are better than theirs because our scientists have nothing left to prove, and they're Nobel laureate types. So I think long term there'll be some sort of confluence of interest and détente. Right now, we're staking out the position that we want medicines as a public good. And so that's a little bit less profitable than they would like, but there's no enmity there.
Okay, we got one more question, and we got just 20 seconds left.
I just wanted to ask for the vaccine side of things. There's been like kind of an unprecedented like anti-vax rise, especially with the COVID vaccine in the U.S. Like, is that something that you guys are thinking about and kind of pulling in communities as we're kind of talking about community buy-in today? Like,
Yes.
do you guys feel your technology will be like widely accepted by people?
You ask good questions.
Yes, it's a great question. We feel ours will be more accepted, especially our interim project of using the existing vaccines. So these vaccines are 100 years old, and they have a long safety track record. And there is some sector of the vaccine hesitant who may say, hey, I've already taken a polio shot before. I'm okay with taking another. So, yeah.
We ran out of time. But thank you so much, Jaykumar. I hope, are you sticking around tonight, or do you have to get in a plane right now?
I'm taking the red eye tonight, so I have a couple of hours.
Are you going to get to come to dinner for a little while?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Well, I hope people will give him further kudos and talk about how you can help him, because this man deserves your help, and we are so pleased to have him here to talk about what he's doing.
Thank you, David. All right.
Thank you.